Hey guys, it's Jeremy here at Metal Music Meltdown, back with another video. What we have today, guys, is an album review of the latest Metallica record, 72 Seasons. I fucking love Metallica. It's always been one of my favorite bands. Was my gateway into heavy metal. Prior to metal, I listened to grunge, alternative music, which was pretty heavy still, or at least guitar-driven music. But Metallica was the band. Based on my age, when their Black album came out, I was 12. So that was kind of my introduction to the Metallica was Black album, and The Load shortly after. But yeah, then I went back and bought up all their material and have bought every release ever since. And yeah, the early stuff is definitely iconic and masterpieces. Later albums have been hit and miss, but I still love the band. I still support them and buy every album no matter what. So let's jump right in, guys, and review this album. I don't want the video to be too long. So this is their 11th studio album overall. It's their follow-up to Hardwired to Self-Destruct in 2016. I didn't realize it was that long. I thought it was only about 4 or 5 years, but it's been 7 years already. And it's also their second record to be released through their own label, Blackened Records, which is pretty cool. And the credited producers are Greg Fiddleman, James Hetfield, and Lars Ulrich. So let's jump right into my overall thoughts of the album in general. It clocks in at 77 minutes. That's kind of one of my biggest problems with this album. It's way too long. It's only got 12 songs on it, so if you average that out, it's about 6 minutes per song. That's one of my kind of gripes about this album. The songs are just too long and repetitive, and they kind of drag out. But we'll get into that a little bit more detailed for each when I go through each song. In terms of the artwork, I'm not a big fan of the artwork overall. I like the concept of 72 seasons. The first 18 years of your life are kind of what sculpts your taste and music and life, and if you went through hardships and things during your childhood, kind of mold you into the adult you become when you're older. So I like the concept of the album. I'm not a big fan of the artwork. I like the yellow kind of pops, a little bit different. It'll definitely stand out on a CD shelf easily. But getting into the record itself, I find it just to be very samey. The style of the songs is very kind of similar throughout the whole record. When I was getting near the end of the album, I found myself finding it hard to distinguish the songs. They kind of bled together. They had a very similar style, very similar song structures. Not overly thrashy, very similar to Hardwired, with a little bit of thrash moments on the odd song, a little bit faster tempo, and a lot of load and reload vibes. It was kind of a blend of like the load and reload era mixed with Hardwired to Self-Destruct. So it had a lot of mid-pace, more groove-driven riffs, not as much thrashy, but more groove-driven. So I'd consider more of a groove metal album with some thrash tendencies. But a lot of repetition was my downfall to it. The songs kind of sounded the same for the most part. There's some small things that were different. Some positives of the album. It's a riff fest. Metallica's really good at writing riffs. Those kind of riffs that you kind of sing along to. They're really catchy and get stuck in your head. So I like that. They're really good at doing that. But at the same time, the riffs kind of got repetitive through some songs, and just kind of wore you down after the 4 or 5 minute mark. James's vocals are really good on this. I think it's the best he's sounded in quite a while. It's really controlled and sounds really good. One of my biggest positives of this record is you can hear the bass in the mix. A lot of their albums, you can't hear Rob's bass at all. It's kind of drowned out. But you can definitely hear his bass in this, and he even has a few moments where he really shines. And they bring him to the forefront, which I really appreciated. Which was really cool. And we'll get into the tracks. So there's 12 tracks in total. The opening track is the title track, 72 Seasons. This is one of my favorite songs on the album. It's got more high intensity, more thrashy. It's much heavier than a lot of the songs on the album. It's a good opener. Definitely a banger. I really enjoyed it. A little bit long, still in over 7 minutes. But it's a good way to open the album and kind of get you ready for the rest of the album. But unfortunately, it quickly goes a little bit downhill from there for me. This is one of the stronger tracks on the album. Following it up is Shadows Follow. A mid-pace song, pretty decent, not too memorable, kind of blends in with the other songs a little bit. It's got a cool kind of like Sabbathy riff halfway through, which was kind of cool. I kind of noticed that. But overall, just a decent song, nothing too crazy. Screaming Suicide was one of their singles as well. It's a decent song, and again, another mid-paced song, very similar in style, very groove-driven. Kind of like I said, it's very samey to Shadows Follow in a lot of ways. So this is where I started noticing very similar song structures, like long intros with before the lyrics kick in, and then verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, long outro. I found the structures of the songs to be very similar. They're kind of following the trend like Maiden, having really long intros, long outros, and just making the album kind of bloated and much longer than it needs to be. But yeah, that's when I kind of started noticing the same kind of patterns and song structures. Sleepwalk My Life Away was the fourth track. This one was kind of cool. The opening had a cool kind of drum rhythm to it and a distorted bass part, which didn't last very long, unfortunately. But and then it kind of went back into a mid pace. Interesting vocal performance on this one, a little bit different than the other ones, a little bit more distinct. But a cool song, had a little bit of a different vibe to it. A more, it's hard to explain, like a more had more atmosphere to it overall. I think a little bit different. And You Must Burn. This is probably, along with the title track, my other favorite song on the album. It's a slower paced song, but it's super heavy. Had one of those like stink face kind of riffs at the beginning, nice and heavy, very Black Sabbath like. Like I said, the pace and the heaviness. I really enjoyed that song. I found myself going back to that one quite a few times after listening to the album as a whole. So definitely a standout track for me. A little bit long, but it stood out a little bit different because it was slower and heavier. Had a much more Sabbathy vibe to it, and it made it stick out more in the album as a whole. And then that goes into Lux Eterna, which was the first single. So this kind of picks up the pace again. I actually like this song because it's only 3.5 minutes, and it gets to the point. It's fast, it's rocking. It's definitely a banger, definitely more on the thrashy edge. Catchy, chanty chorus. And like I said, it's a shorter song. It's more edited down. I like that it kind of hits where it needs to be, and then it's just done. So definitely one of the better tracks I like as well. Crown of Barbed Wire. This was a decent track. It had a pretty fast intro, and then it went back to the kind of mid pace, where it kind of bled to be the same sound as some of the other earlier tracks. So I'm like, yeah, it's just another mid pace song. Nothing horrible, nothing great. I just thought it was pretty decent. Chasing Light. The standard for this song was the chorus. Was one of the more catchier choruses on the album, I believe. But again, it was more of a mid-paced song. Had some upper tempo parts. Great riffs on this song. Very memorable. But yeah, just a decent song again. Nothing mind-blowing, but again, more load, reload kind of vibes on that one. If Darkness Had a Sun, honestly, I think this is my least favorite song on the album. It was one of the singles. I kind of liked it when I first heard it to a degree. But the more I listen to it, the less I like it. It's just very dragged out. It's too long in my opinion at 6.5 minutes, and it's just kind of like repetitive and doesn't seem to really go anywhere in the song. So this is definitely one of the songs I'm not as much of a fan of now. And Too Far Gone was a pretty decent track. It's mid-paced again as well, but had a cool vocal performance. And the timing on the song at 4.5 minutes, I think they edited it down perfectly. It's not too long, it's not too short, it's exactly where it needs to be. Really good riffs on this one, and it's one of the more musically structured. I think it's one of the stronger songs on the album. It's got more, I guess, thought in the composition. The next one is Room of Mirrors. I think this is one of the stronger tracks on the album. Definitely more thrashy, much heavier. This was a standout track for me. Pretty good length at 5.5 minutes. Maybe could have cut it down a little bit, but it was much heavier. I wish more of the album sounded like this, but again, it was repetitive, and it's not a sound I've not heard before from Metallica. There's a lot more. It sounded like a lot of recycled ideas and song structure and sound that I've heard kind of from their discography before. And the last song, In a Morada, This one's clocking over 11 minutes. At first, I thought it was going to be like this super epic, mind-blowing thing. It's a pretty decent song. The strength of this song is the dynamics of the song. Is they change it up. It's not kind of the same as the rest. But my downfall to the song is it takes, I think, until the 7 minute mark, and out of the 11 minutes, we finally start hearing some melody and some harmonizing in the guitars. At the beginning, kind of drags a bit, and then there's a cool slow part in the middle with like a bass bridge, which shows some dynamics. Like it kind of really slows down and is more melodic. So I like that part of it. It kind of changed it up from the rest of the album. So it's definitely more dynamic in this song, which I really appreciated, but just way too friggin' long at the end of the album. 11 minutes is way too long, and it didn't need to be that long at all. So my standard tracks overall would be the title track, 72 Seasons. You Must Burn was a big one. Lux Eterna, and I'd say Room of Mirrors are probably the ones. And then Too Far Gone is one of the ones as well. Least favorite track I'd say is probably If Darkest Had a Sun. I kind of lost interest in that song. But overall, pretty solid album. Just way too long. They needed to edit it down more. I wouldn't say it's anything that blew my mind away. It's what I kind of expected. Kind of a continuation of Hardwired, but a little bit more repetitive. And I found the songs on Hardwired to be more distinguishable and had more variation in the album. I don't like this one as much as Hardwired, in my opinion. If I off the top of my head, if I had to put in the ranking of their albums, it's more to the middle, to the lower part of Metallica Records. I'd say it's probably above like Saint Anger, Load, Reload, and those albums, and it's below Hardwired, probably in the kind of same line as maybe Death Magnetic and that kind of range. So around 11 albums, it's probably sit around number 7, 6 or 7 roughly. It's kind of mid to the bottom range of their album discography. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the albums, guys. I think it's gonna be one of those albums where the more you listen to it, the more it'll be a grower. I think it's the more you listen to it, the more you'll kind of get into it and find more things about it. But let me know down below, guys, what you thought of the album. Did you think it's amazing? I know a lot of diehard Metallica fans just love all their stuff, and I do too, but I try to be honest with my reviews and give my purest thoughts on the record. But let me know down below, guys, what you thought of the record. Were you blown away? Was it what you expected? For me personally, it's kind of what I expected. Nothing too mind-blowing. Had some good heavy parts, kind of repetitive, and way too long was my biggest gripe. But yeah, overall, pretty solid record. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I'll definitely be listening to it on rotation for a bit. And thanks for watching, guys. If you're new to the channel, definitely hit that subscribe button down below. And until next time, keep it metal.